You know, the epistle lesson that we read this morning? Where was the Apostle Paul as he was writing the letter? He was in prison. Do you see prison as a place of abundance or strength or power within this world? Me neither. He's in a place of scarcity and weakness. And all of his enemies were so happy that he was there, because they believed that with Paul being there, they could finally silence him. And Paul could have given up. He could have said, you know what? I'm done. This isn't working. This improbable message that I'm proclaiming, that I've experienced in Christ, and the improbable message being that all people are to share in the full blessing of God. You know, this improbable message that the Old Testament, yeah, it has some support for, but that's not how the synagogues are teaching it. This message that Gentiles are putting me into prison for, that other Christians are shouting me down for, and the Jews would be glad for me to be gone with. This message isn't working. And if he just looked around at the world around him, he would have every single reason to give up. Throw in the towel and say, I'm done. You know, this is somebody else's job to do, and somebody else can take care of it. But Paul, he didn't judge his success by looking at the world around him. He judged his calling and his purpose and his meaning and the value of what he was about by looking up, by lifting up his eyes to God and listening for the voice that was calling to him, and recognizing that though the world might be out of step with him at that moment, that he was in step with God. And his prayer is that we might do the same thing. Because we can all look around us and we can easily find whatever we want in our life to find the reason why we can't. Right? We can look around, and no matter what it is, we can probably find a very good, convincing argument why we can't do something, either in our personal life or as a church. But if we look up, it can transform everything. And so Paul writes, I pray that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant that you be strengthened in your inner being with power through his Spirit, that your soul, that your fullness takes on the presence of God, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith as you are being rooted and grounded in love. It isn't necessarily a work that you are doing. It is a work that God is continually doing in each of our lives, speaking truth to us, surrounding us daily in his love and his mercy and his grace. And I pray that you may have the power to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and the length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled with the fullness of God. Paul's prayer is that we might be brought into greater communion with God's love, because God's love is what has the power to change the realities of this world. God's love is what has the power to make plenty in the desert and light that shines in the darkness. God's love is what moves us from the binding fears of scarcity to the life-giving heart of God's generosity. Becoming more and more alive to God's love is what moves us from being a people defined by this world. It's God's love being received into our hearts, our being, that gives us the freedom to no longer be defined by the possibilities of this world, and instead to be a people defined by the mercy, the grace, the truth of our God.